You filed a homeowner's claim. The damage felt obvious, the cause felt covered, and you assumed your policy would handle it. Then the denial letter arrived, full of words like exclusion and peril, and it left you confused and frustrated. If that has happened to you, you are not alone, and in most cases the denial was not random. It usually traces back to how your policy is structured and to a handful of exclusions that exist in nearly every homeowner's policy in the country. The single biggest source of confusion is a distinction most people have never heard of: named perils versus open perils. Those two phrases quietly decide whether a claim even gets considered. In this video, we will walk through what each one means, why floods and earth movement are almost always left out, and how everyday wear and tear can sink a claim that feels completely legitimate. None of this is advice about your specific policy. Rules, prices, and definitions vary by state, by insurer, and by the exact contract you signed, so always read your own documents and talk to a licensed agent. The goal here is simply to help you understand the language so the next letter makes sense. Let us start with the word that causes most of the trouble: peril. In insurance, a peril is simply the cause of a loss. Fire is a peril. A windstorm is a peril. Theft, a burst pipe, a falling tree, hail, vandalism, the weight of ice on a roof, these are all perils. When something goes wrong at your home, the insurer does not just ask how bad the damage is. It asks what caused it, because the cause determines whether coverage applies at all. This matters because two homes can have identical water damage on the floor, but if one was caused by a sudden pipe burst and the other by a slow leak that went unnoticed for months, they may be treated completely differently. Same puddle, different cause, different outcome. So when you read your policy, train yourself to think in terms of cause, not just damage. The question that drives almost every claim decision is not just what broke, but why it broke, and whether that particular why is something your contract agreed to cover. A named perils policy works like a guest list. It covers only the specific causes of loss that are written down by name in the document and nothing else. If the peril is on the list, you are inside the door. If it is not on the list, you are not getting in, even if the loss feels obvious and unfair. A typical named perils list might include fire, lightning, windstorm, hail, theft, vandalism, and a set of other specifically described events. Some personal property coverage and some older or more basic policies are written this way. The burden here generally falls on you, the policyholder, to show that the cause of your loss matches one of the named perils. The advantage of named perils coverage is that it tends to cost less, because the insurer is taking on a narrower set of risks. The disadvantage is exactly the same fact from the other side. Anything not specifically named is simply not covered, and that gap is where a lot of surprised homeowners find themselves after a loss they assumed was protected. An open perils policy, sometimes called all risk, flips the logic completely. Instead of listing what is covered, it covers everything except what is specifically excluded. The door is open by default, and the policy then posts a list of who is not allowed in. That is a much broader starting point, and it is why open perils coverage is often considered more protective. Many homeowners' policies apply open perils coverage to the physical structure of the house itself. But broader does not mean unlimited, and this is where people get tripped up. The protection you actually have depends entirely on how long and how specific the exclusion list is. With open perils, the burden generally shifts. Rather than you proving the cause is covered, the insurer typically has to point to a written exclusion to deny the claim. That sounds like good news, and often it is, but insurers write those exclusion lists carefully and deliberately. The most important page in an open perils policy is not the list of what is covered. It is the list of what is excluded, because that list is doing all the real work. Now we get to the two exclusions that catch the most people off guard, because they apply to both named perils and open perils homeowners policies almost universally. The first is flood. Rising water from outside the home, storm surge, overflowing rivers, and the kind of widespread water that comes up from the ground is generally not covered by a standard homeowner's policy. Flood coverage is typically handled separately, often through the National Flood Insurance Program or certain private flood policies, and it usually must be purchased on its own. The second is earth movement, a category that commonly includes earthquakes, landslides, sinkholes, and the gradual settling or shifting of ground. These events can cause enormous structural damage, and many homeowners simply assume they are covered, only to learn otherwise after the fact. Earthquake protection is also usually a separate policy or endorsement. Why are these excluded? In broad terms, these events can affect huge numbers of homes at once, which makes them harder to insure under a standard policy. Whether you need separate flood or earthquake coverage depends heavily on where you live and your personal risk. So this is a conversation to have with a licensed agent rather than a guess to make on your own. Here is the exclusion that produces the most genuinely heartbreaking denials, because the damage often feels real, sudden, and entirely deserving of coverage. Homeowners insurance is designed to cover sudden and accidental losses, not the slow, predictable decline that comes from age and use. So wear and tear, deterioration, rust, rot, mold in many cases, and general lack of maintenance are commonly excluded. Think about a roof that has been quietly aging for 20 years. When it finally leaks during a storm, it can feel like the storm caused the damage. But if an adjuster determines the real cause was an old, worn-out roof that should have been replaced, the claim may be denied as wear and tear rather than approved as storm damage. The same logic applies to pipes that corrode slowly over years, to a deck that rots from long-term moisture, or to a leak that dripped unnoticed for months. The hard truth built into these policies is that insurance is not a maintenance plan. It is protection against the unexpected, not reimbursement for the things that wear out over time. This is why routine upkeep and keeping records of that upkeep matters so much. It is not just about preventing damage. It is about being able to show that a loss was sudden rather than the result of years of neglect. Put these pieces together, and you can see why so many denials feel unjust even when they technically follow the contract. A claim can feel completely legitimate and still be denied, and usually it comes down to one of three things. First, the cause of loss simply was not covered, like flood damage on a policy that excludes flood. Second, the policy is named Perils, and the specific cause was never on the list. Third, the adjuster concluded the underlying cause was gradual wear and tear or a maintenance issue rather than a sudden accident. There is also the question of what counts as the cause when several things combine. If a long-term leak you did not address eventually leads to a sudden collapse, the insurer may focus on the original neglected leak as the real cause. The lesson is not that insurers are out to get you. It is that the language of the policy and the determination of cause decides everything. If you ever receive a denial you do not understand, you can ask for the specific reason in writing, request a copy of your full policy, and review the exact exclusion being cited. State insurance departments also offer consumer resources, and a licensed agent or public adjuster can help you understand your options. So here is the honest, neutral bottom line. Homeowners insurance does not cover everything, and it was never designed to. Whether your policy is named Perils, covering only the causes on a written list, or open Perils, covering everything except the exclusions, the most important pages are the ones describing what is left out. Floods and earth movement sit outside almost every standard policy and typically require separate coverage. Wear and tear, deterioration, and maintenance problems are excluded because insurance covers the sudden and accidental, not the slow and predictable. The best thing you can do is not wait for a loss to learn how your own policy works. Pull out your declarations page, find the exclusions section, and read it before you ever need to file. If something is unclear, ask your agent which type of coverage you have and what is genuinely excluded for your home and your region. Remember that coverage, pricing, and definitions vary by state, by insurer, and by your specific contract, so nothing here is a substitute for reading your own documents and getting advice tailored to you. This video is general information, not financial or insurance advice. For your situation, consult a licensed agent and check official sources like your state insurance department. Understanding the language ahead of time is the surest way to make sure your next letter is one you can actually understand.